Ladies and gentlemen, poverty is not just about empty pockets. It is about inherited stories that tell you who you are allowed to be and how far you are allowed to go. The poor don't stay poor because they lack talent, but because they are trapped in cycles of scarcity, shame, and survival that crush imagination before it can even take root. But what if I told you that escaping poverty begins not with money, but with rewriting the story you've been told about your own worth? Poverty is not only a condition of the wallet, it is a condition of the mind, of the body, of the stories we inherit about what is possible for us. To stay poor is not simply to lack money, but to lack access to the kinds of relationships, opportunities, and internal permission that make wealth creation possible. We often think poverty is a fixed state, a permanent identity, but it is not. It is a pattern, and like all patterns, it can be reinforced, repeated, or disrupted. When we ask why the poor stay poor, the answers are rarely as simple as laziness or bad decisions. These explanations are seductive because they give us a sense of control. If poverty is a matter of choice, then we can avoid it by choosing differently. But the truth is far more nuanced. Poverty is sustained by systems that reward those who already have resources and punish those who do not. It is reinforced by intergenerational scripts that tell us what our lives are meant to look like, how far we are allowed to dream, and when we are supposed to settle for less. A child raised in scarcity learns quickly that survival is the priority. Choices are guided by the immediacy of hunger, the urgency of bills, the unpredictability of emergencies. The future feels abstract, almost fictional, when the present is demanding everything. This mindset, often called the scarcity trap, is not a flaw of character. It is an adaptation to circumstances. But when scarcity becomes the dominant story, it restricts the imagination. To escape poverty, you must first escape the mental prison that tells you tomorrow will never be safe enough to plan for. Relationships, too, shape how poverty persists. In wealthy environments, networks of trust create access. A phone call that leads to a job, an introduction that leads to funding, a mentor who explains how to negotiate. In poor environments, relationships are often transactional and immediate. Who can help today? Who has a spare meal? Who can lend a little money? These bonds are vital for survival, but they rarely create long-term mobility. It is not that poor communities lack generosity or connection, but that their connections are tied to survival rather than growth. To rise out of poverty often requires stepping into networks that feel foreign, intimidating, or even betraying to the world you come from. There is also the unspoken loyalty to the family narrative. If your parents worked multiple jobs, if your grandparents labored with their hands, you may feel an invisible pull to honor their sacrifice by repeating the same script. To dream bigger can feel like an act of disloyalty, as if success were a betrayal of the lineage that carried you. This hidden conflict often keeps people tethered to the familiar, even when they have opportunities to move beyond it. Escaping poverty is not only a financial journey, it is an emotional negotiation between where you come from and where you want to go. Education is one of the most visible escape routes, yet it is often sabotaged by the very conditions of poverty. When you are poor, studying is a privilege. Time spent reading is time not spent earning. The pressure to contribute financially comes early, and with it, the chance to focus deeply on learning evaporates. Even when education is attained, the hidden curriculum of how to navigate middle-class or wealthy spaces, how to network, how to carry yourself, how to read subtle cues is not taught in classrooms. The poor are often excluded not by their lack of knowledge, but by their lack of fluency in these invisible cultural codes. And then there is shame. Poverty carries with it a narrative of deficiency. You are told, implicitly or explicitly, that you are less capable, less disciplined, less deserving. Shame corrodes ambition because it tells you that failure is not circumstantial, but inherent. Escaping poverty requires more than skill. It requires the audacity to believe you are worthy of a life you have never seen modeled. This is why role models matter, why exposure matters, why stepping outside of your immediate environment matters. You cannot aspire to what you cannot imagine. So how does one escape it? The first step is awareness, to recognize that poverty is not an identity, but a condition. You may be poor, but you are not poverty itself. You can observe the scripts that have been handed down to you and decide which ones you want to keep. You can ask, what are the beliefs I inherited about money, success, and possibility? Which ones serve me, and which ones keep me small? This reflection is not abstract. It is practical. A belief such as "people like us never get ahead" directly shapes the risks you are willing to take, the investments you are willing to make, the doors you even attempt to open. The second step is to learn to manage scarcity without letting scarcity manage you. This means creating small pockets of abundance where you can. Save something, however minimal, not because the amount will transform your life, but because the act itself signals that tomorrow matters. Invest in learning, even in fragments, because knowledge compounds in ways that money sometimes cannot. Seek out communities where people are oriented toward growth, not only survival. It may feel uncomfortable, even threatening. Taos. Enter spaces where people speak a language of wealth, but discomfort is often the first sign of growth. Escaping poverty is not only about gaining money, it is about gaining perspective. The poor stay poor in part because they cannot afford mistakes. Every setback is devastating, every wrong choice costly. But to build wealth, you must eventually learn to risk, to fail, to recover. This requires resilience, but also the emotional support of people who remind you that you are not defined by your circumstances. Surround yourself with those who see possibility in you, who remind you that your dreams are valid, even when the evidence is scarce. There is power in reframing the story you tell yourself. If poverty taught you resilience, adaptability, creativity, then carry these lessons forward as assets rather than burdens. If scarcity taught you to stretch resources, then imagine how you can stretch opportunities. To escape poverty, you must stop negotiating only with necessity and start negotiating with possibility. It is also important to learn the mechanics of money, because financial illiteracy is often weaponized against the poor. Interest rates, credit scores, investments, taxes, these are not simply technical terms, they are tools of empowerment. To understand them is to stop playing a game where the rules are hidden from you. Seek knowledge not only in formal settings, but in every conversation, every book, every chance encounter. Curiosity itself is a form of wealth. And finally, remember that escape is not abandonment. To rise beyond poverty is not to reject your family or your community, but to expand what is possible for them. You become a bridge, a model, a source of proof that another way exists. The poor stay poor when the cycle of limitation goes unchallenged. But when one person steps out and refuses to accept poverty as destiny, the cycle begins to creep. Escaping poverty is not simply about having more, it is about becoming more daring, more open, more connected, more willing to believe in futures that were once unthinkable. Escaping poverty is not simply about having more, it is about becoming more daring, more open, more connected, more willing to believe in futures that were once unthinkable. And yet becoming more is not an event, it is a practice. It is the repeated decision to step into spaces where you feel unprepared, to stretch your tolerance for uncertainty, to replace resignation with curiosity. It is the refusal to let the conditions of your birth dictate the conditions of your destiny. One of the greatest misunderstandings about wealth is that it is only measured in money. Wealth is also measured in time, in relationships, in knowledge, in freedom of choice. When you are poor, your time is often consumed by survival. Working longer hours, solving immediate crises, waiting in lines, negotiating small debts. Your relationships may be narrowed to those who share your same struggles, and your choices constrained by necessity. To build wealth is to slowly reclaim these dimensions of life, to have time not just to work, but to rest and imagine, to cultivate relationships that open doors, to expand the menu of options from which you can choose. The journey begins with a shift in perspective. Instead of asking, "How do I survive today?" you begin to ask, "What actions today create a better tomorrow?" This shift may feel impossible at first, because when survival is pressing, tomorrow feels like a luxury. But the paradox is that it is precisely the commitment to tomorrow that begins to loosen the grip of poverty. It is setting aside 10 minutes to learn a new skill, even if the return is not immediate. It is choosing to repair a relationship rather than burn a bridge, because tomorrow you may need that connection. It is saving a single coin, not because it changes your status, but because it changes your story. You are now someone who invests in your future. There is also the courage to confront the stories you carry about yourself. If you were told you are not smart enough, not talented enough, not worthy of success, those words linger in your body like invisible chains. They dictate what jobs you apply for, what salaries you negotiate, what risks you avoid. Escaping poverty requires rewriting these internal scripts. Instead of "I can't," you practice "I can learn." Instead of "I don't belong," you tell yourself, "I am learning how to belong." Language is powerful because it shapes not only how others perceive you, but how you perceive yourself. The poor stay poor when they adopt the narrative of unworthiness. They begin to escape when they tell a new story about their identity. Think, too, about the habits that compound over time. Poverty often traps people in cycles of reaction. A bill arrives, a crisis strikes, and all energy is spent managing emergencies. Wealth, by contrast, is built on cycles of preparation. The small habit of tracking expenses creates clarity. The small habit of reading daily creates perspective. The small habit of asking questions creates opportunities. These actions may appear trivial in the moment, but like drops of water on stone, they carve new possibilities over time. The poor stay poor, not because they are incapable, but because the weight of survival makes these habits feel out of reach. To escape is to reclaim the discipline of small, consistent acts that compound into transformation. Relationships continue to play an essential role in this journey. Many people who rise out of poverty speak of a turning point. Someone believed in them. Someone introduced them to a new world. Someone modeled what was possible. Sometimes it is a teacher, a mentor, a colleague, or even a stranger. These connections are not accidents. They are cultivated by curiosity and courage. When you ask questions, when you seek guidance, when you dare to step into unfamiliar circles, you invite these relationships into your life. It can feel intimidating, even humiliating, to admit what you don't know. But vulnerability is often the price of entry into new networks. The poor stay poor when they remain confined to circles that only recycle the same resources. To escape is to expand the circle until it includes those who can guide you beyond survival. There is another dimension, the courage to handle money differently. Poverty often breeds a scarcity mindset. Spend quickly because something will always take it away. Borrow when necessary because tomorrow cannot be trusted. Escaping requires a different relationship with money, one that treats it as a tool, not an enemy, not a fleeting visitor. This does not mean hoarding every coin, but learning to allocate resources with intention. It means separating wants from needs, short-term pleasures from long-term gains. It means asking, each time money passes through your hands, does this choice build my future or diminish it? Over time, this mindset transforms not only your finances, but your sense of agency. You begin to feel that you are directing your life, not merely reacting to it. Let us also acknowledge the role of resilience. To escape poverty is not a straight line. There will be setbacks, jobs lost, debts incurred, unexpected emergencies. Each setback tempts you to return to old patterns, to believe that escape is impossible. But resilience is the art of returning again and again to the vision of a better life. It is the refusal to let failure define you. Wealthy families pass down assets. Poor families pass down resilience. What if resilience itself were treated as capital, invested wisely, multiplied across generations? When you see resilience not as a burden but as an inheritance, you transform its meaning. Exposure is another vital ingredient. You cannot aspire to a life you have never witnessed. Travel if you can, even within your own city. Read books that take you into different worlds. Watch how people who are free with their choices carry themselves. Notice how they speak about time, about possibility, about risk. Exposure is not about comparison. It is about expansion. It stretches your sense of what is possible. The poor stay poor when their world remains small. They begin to rise when their vision grows larger than their current circumstances. But escape is not solitary. There is a myth of the lone hero who climbs out of poverty by sheer willpower. In reality, escape is collective. Families, communities, and networks all play a role. Sometimes it means banding together to pool resources. Sometimes it means encouraging one another to dream bigger. Sometimes it means having the courage to be the first to leave so that others can follow. You are not just escaping for yourself. You are expanding the horizon for everyone connected to you. The journey out of poverty also involves confronting fear. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of stepping into unfamiliar worlds. These fears are real, and they often feel paralyzing. But fear can also be a signal that you are moving toward growth. The presence of fear does not mean you should stop. It means you are standing at the threshold of something new. The poor stay poor when fear dictates their choices. They escape when they learn to carry fear with them, to act in spite of it, to reframe it as evidence that they are stretching beyond the known. Imagine for a moment that poverty is a story written for you before you could even speak. You inherited the characters, the setting, the plot. Escaping poverty means becoming the author of a new story. You may not control every circumstance, but you can control the narrative you tell about what those circumstances mean. You can write a story of survival, of resilience, of ambition, of transformation. And when you do, you offer that story to others, showing them that they, too, can become authors of their own lives. This is why personal growth, education, financial literacy, and community are not luxuries. They are necessities. They are the tools that allow you to edit the story, to change its direction, to create an ending different from the one that was predicted for you. Each new skill, each new habit, each new relationship is like adding a new chapter to your book. And with each chapter, the inevitability of poverty loosens its grip. To escape poverty is not to erase where you come from. It is to honor it by refusing to let it be the boundary of your possibility. It is to carry forward the lessons of struggle, the strength of survival, and the wisdom of scarcity, while also embracing the abundance that comes when you dare to want more. The poor stay poor when they confuse loyalty with limitation. They begin to escape when they realize that the greatest act of loyalty is to break the cycle so that those who come after them inherit not just resilience, but freedom.